Well, good afternoon, everybody. Darren Saul, your host of Playing with Perspective, the Suspended Animation Podcast. Friday afternoon. Hope everybody's had a fantastic week. We have episode 114 with our famous Kerrie Wood. How are you, Kerrie?
Hello, Darren. Thank you very much for inviting me back. I'm surprised that you have after the last time. I was quite flattered that we had so much time together.
Of course, I'm going to invite you back. And
Thank
now, for everybody out there, Kerrie joined us right at the beginning of when COVID hit our shores in Sydney. It was episode 26, I think.
Goodness, was it?
Yeah, episode 26. And we were chatting all about how the coronavirus has affected the hospitality industry, the wedding industry, the entertainment industry, etc. And I thought we'd bring Kerrie back 6 months or so later to give us the skinny on what's changed, where we're at with all the new restrictions, how to host functions that are COVID safe, etc., etc. So Kerrie is a wealth of knowledge in this area. But for everybody out there who doesn't know who Kerrie was, or Kerrie is, and hasn't seen that last show, Kerrie is the director and lead wedding planner and stylist from LUXE Unforgettable Events, which is a bespoke wedding planning, styling, on-the-day coordination and event management service-based company in Sydney, whose distinctive service caters to be-wed couples from near and far so that they may enjoy their day wherever their preferred wedding location may be. So welcome back to the show, Kerrie. Great to have you here again.
Thank you so much, Darren. It's really lovely to come back and join you and all your viewers, obviously, and have an opportunity to update what's happened to the wedding industry specifically, and of course, all of the allied industries that we work with and across.
Absolutely.
Jumping straight into it, the year has obviously been incredibly devastating, not only for wedding industry per se, and wedding industry is quite a broad church, if you like, in terms of, a terminology, because within that there are planners, there are stylists, there are venues, there are suppliers of all shapes and sizes, as well as vendors, etc. So when we talk about the wedding industry, the labyrinth is really quite in depth. And the impacts are quite domino in so far as that it starts with obviously the restrictions that came in when we first spoke, which were quite devastating in actual fact, and they really changed our landscape significantly.
Definitely. Absolutely.
For quite some time, of course, most of winter, we were all in lockdown anyway. So there was very little happening in terms of wedding activation or rescheduling. Most weddings had still been yet to be postponed and rescheduled, because I think everyone was still in a bit of a state of shock as to, my goodness, where is this actually taking us, and where is it going to lead to? And nobody could have imagined that we'd be sitting here in October still speaking about an industry and the partner industries that have literally been closed down.
So true.
Basically, we are starting to see a little bit of a comeback, if you like, in terms of the restrictions. So we've been through the no weddings to 10 people at a wedding to 20 people at a wedding. As of yesterday, it's 30 people at a wedding.
Oh, is that right? Yesterday?
Yes, that's in private homes. Now, the condition to that is, and that seems to be a key message that is being lost, is that it is only relative if you have the space so that you can actually build into seating plans, standing plans, etc., the one person per meter per square meter rule. And that goes with also the recently announced permission as of December 1st for venues to take up to 300. Again, that is conditional on the venue being large enough to be able to have a seating and floor plan that must accommodate all of the current standing orders of the day. Now, that may sound quite easy. In actual fact, it's not. The reality is each venue have very different configurations. Under normal or pre-COVID, and we're going to probably obviously talk about pre-COVID and post-COVID for years, and current COVID. So pre-COVID, of course, most venues would say, you know, maybe they can take 100, but they could maybe squeeze in 110.
Yeah.
Under the current public health orders, that is not doable.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we do know that we have some operators in the industry, and it's only a few, that are actually instrumental in creating opportunities that are outside of the current public health orders.
Really?
Now, the problem with this is that if they get caught, there are huge fines, and eventually they will. And you know, I think it's doing a massive disservice to all of us in the wedding industry,
Yep.
as well as events industry and venues
Definitely.
that are actually, you know, a part of, well, let's do the best we can,
Yep.
pivoting our businesses so that we can address the issues moving forward and still to stay within this safety and, of course, the compliance of the public health orders of the day per state, because there is no uniformity across all the states either. So that is another issue, particularly when we're having a little bit of movement in terms of borders opening. Not all of our borders are open. As we know, Queensland is still not really inviting us southerners up to say hello yet. But, and of course, that impacts on people's capacity to look at their guest list. We still have a lot of people who are sitting on the fence in terms of hoping that their original vision for the day, which all would of course included a dance floor, which at the moment is not permitted. They're so kind of sitting there waiting, thinking, surely this can't continue. The reality is, I think that as businesses, we have to work within the parameters we have and be flexible enough to adjust as the rollbacks are rolled out by various governments.
Definitely.
That's the only thing we can do. We can't sit here and say, well, we hope. Last thing we should be ever doing is promising things that we cannot deliver or we have absolutely no control over. And quite frankly, where this is concerned in terms of public health orders under government instrumentalities, we have no authority to promise anything except what we know we can deliver. So that's the position I take with our potential clients, our future clients. We have had a lot of inquiry about the wedding pivot that we undertook back in March. A lot of them actually are the ones that are still sitting hoping that we can get a larger operation going. So they're waiting for that activation time when they can have that 180 plus dance floors, plus this activation and all the trimmings, if you like. And we hope that is sooner rather than later. We have other couples who, of course, have just said, well, look, you know, life's too short to worry about when and ifs. Let's go ahead and do it now. And we just delivered a beautiful, beautiful wedding that actually did have all the beautiful elements of the traditional wedding day, save for the dance floor, of course, because that was 3 weeks ago now. So there was no dance floor activation permitted whatsoever 3 weeks ago. Whereas now we have dance floor permissions for 20 in the wedding party, but not all at the same time. So that's right. COVID marshals have to be, I suppose, the dance floor,
chaperones,
and you know, tap you on the shoulder if you know too many people are getting on the dance floor. And the whole point of that is to avoid that close contact when people are usually dancing, they're singing. And that is what the concern is, obviously, by the public health authorities. So basically, we've gone from there to now we can have 20. I do perceive that we will be having dance floor activations happening in probably the not near distant future, but there will be a lot of restrictions and parameters around that as well. So I'm kind of not going to second guess that. I'm just waiting to see what the next rollbacks are, and then we'll adapt again to be able to accommodate that. I've already got some interesting ideas, which I'll share with you maybe another time, because I want to share them first with some lovely clients. Or when the opportunity does arise and we're able to engage across some of my creative pivoting that I've got.
Excellent.
All happening in there. So it's been a tough year. Not just for us in the wedding industry or the events industry or hospitality, hotels, aviation. It's just been, I think, for everybody who's had to be locked down, and poor old Victoria, who's still hasn't come out of lockdown completely yet, and our thoughts and prayers go out to those guys, because, you know, the challenge to continuously be in lockdown, mentally, emotionally, financially,
It's
is
exhausting.
exhausting. Exactly.
Yeah,
So,
exhausting.
but there, for the grace of God, go any of us if we allow things to get out of control. So
That's right.
I think the message here is that if we all do the right thing, and it's really not that difficult. We're talking
No.
about, you know, personal hygiene,
Yep.
consideration,
Yep.
and just being a little bit more aware than possibly we have been in a couple of decades.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with a bit of a step up in our personal hygiene anyway.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
right.
and if it does make a difference, particularly to the more vulnerable in our communities,
Yeah.
then I think that's really important. So that's,
Yeah.
you know, one of the things that when we have our on-the-day activations, we have operational on-the-day activation plans, which are registered with New South Wales Health.
Yep.
They are very detailed and very processed. They do actually go out to all of our suppliers, vendors, and venues. We interact with the venues per se to have the operational and activational COVID marshals on the day.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that these things are important, it's not just the compliance and seem to be doing, it is the doing. Because within wedding groups, we have, the demographics are quite broad. So we have quite young, we have, you know, people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and then we have some more senior members of our communities that are very much part of a wedding day experience. And personally, I couldn't imagine anything worse than anyone becoming unwell at one of my weddings
Oh,
that I've planned, styled, and activated and delivered on the day. I mean, it
absolutely.
would just be hideous.
Yep.
That's not to say that things can't happen, but certainly with an appropriate activation plan, which minimizes the amount of personal interaction with every element across the wedding build and the setup. And then, of course, the delivery, that's the service personnel, event personnel, as well as my delivery team.
Yep.
That minimizes the opportunity for any ill health or misadventure regarding COVID-19. I suppose the good news is flu's down, colds are down. So, you know, there hasn't been a positive to this, and I'm trying to find some silver linings to keep everyone buoyant and going. And I think the silver lining is that we've all had to become a little bit more creative and think deeper about, okay, what can we do now, continuing along as we will be continuing along. And let's face it, until there is a vaccine, there'll be no full reset. So we need to live and to learn to live within what we've got and adapt as we continue along. So for instance, I'm very pleased to announce that a gap has been identified in the service component of between wedding planning, on the day coordination, and venue coordinators, and that we're calling it an on the day or pre-wedding day concierge. So where a venue might have a wedding coordinator who will take care of all of the bits and pieces and elements that are within the venue, they don't normally become involved with any external activations with suppliers or vendors, such as photographers, videographers, you know, the cars, the florists, etc. You know, unless of course the florist is also having being the florist and floral stylist in the venue. So there's a number of shall we say concierge services that we are now going to be providing, which is specific to that wedding and that particular venue, which does include, of course, dedicated seating and floor plans, which of course are very time consuming, and they are to scale, so they do require a lot of shall we say dedicated coverage of the venue space and getting the floor plans right so that it doesn't only comply under public health orders, it actually becomes part of the wedding day style, which is what we did at our recent wedding. We actually had double width tables.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So we went 2.5 wide, 4.2 long.
It's got its own charm in a way, doesn't it?
It became very charming. And of course, happy to say that if you want to have a bit of a sneak peek, please go to our website at www.luxeunforgettable.com.au and click on the little gold link that says country romance.
Oh, lovely.
So that's a link that'll take you straight to some really beautiful vision of the day,
Good.
which was, I mean, the day was beautiful, but also the photography has really captured the essence of the day and the joy and the celebration of the day, which I
Good.
think is really what we're saying is still possible, even under the public health order restrictions. Although we are seeing a lot of people who are saying, we'll get married, we'll just have the celebrant, our two witnesses, and then, you know, when this is all over, we'll have a bit of a big party and mum and dad can come from, you know, Queensland, and so can come from China, and so can come from France, and so on and so on. So we are seeing a lot of that as well. So we've kind of got the ones that are sitting on the fence still, you know, evaluating what can and can't be done. The ones that are just going for just let's get married and we'll party later. And
Yeah.
then the ones that have said, we're going to do this and we're going to make the most of it regardless. It's our time and we want it to be as joyful and beautiful as we possibly can. And we certainly want to talk to all of you out there that really want to talk about thinking, let's do it. It's our time right now.
Awesome. Well, let's chat a bit about, you know, how things have changed. And obviously there are certain challenges that you have to overcome to deliver a traditional style wedding in this new environment. So
Sure.
tell us a bit about what you've done, what are those challenges and what you've done to overcome them and bring them into the new style. Like you just mentioned, the table width was one of them. Give
Mm.
us some ideas as to, you know, what you've done that's new and novel, that's actually maybe created a bit more of a charm to something that we didn't think about.
I think one of the very special elements that we introduced at the last wedding, because that wedding was pre any dancing activation whatsoever, was that we introduced the bride and groom who transitioned from their recessional, which is when they're leaving the ceremony space.
Yep.
And they had this gorgeous long aisle, about 200 meters.
Yep.
And so they transitioned from their recessional music to their first dance music. And then they literally waltzed all the way up this 150, 200 meter aisleway to their waiting horse and carriage.
Oh, wow, cool.
And to the delight of their wedding guests, and it really was beautiful. They looked so elegant. It was so romantic, but also they really handled it well.
Yep.
They did, of course, go and have some dance lessons beforehand.
Great.
Don't forget, a lot of the other things that's happening now with COVID weddings is that if people decide to go, they're kind of wanting to go pretty quick. And we had to fit into where space may be within the venue, opportunities as well. So we actually planned, restyled, and delivered that in 3.8 weeks.
Wow.
So yeah, we hit the ground running. So that level of flexibility, that level of knowledge and experience is something that is really coming to the fore now, because we don't really have the time to be doing the research elements that we may have been afforded by when we had 10, 8 months, 12 months to build a wedding.
Yeah.
So we really have to know our vendors, our suppliers, and we really have to have action plans that are immediately engaging.
And how do you keep track of what's new, what the new restrictions are, what's been lifted, what you can't do, because it changes every week?
It does, and sadly, the mainstream news doorstops and headlines are not always, shall we say, informative, or there's not a lot of depth in it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, whenever anyone hears, wedding rollbacks, and of course, if they're a couple who are waiting on rescheduling their wedding, or possibly a new couple, a newly engaged couple who are thinking about getting married, all they hear is rollback on wedding.
Yeah.
They don't actually hear the devil in the detail, and it always is the devil in the detail.
Yeah.
I have an absolute, I have links that link me into New South Wales Health.
Okay.
I call on a regular basis and chat about clarifying exactly what the restrictions mean, what the dates are in terms of qualification. And so that's how I keep in touch. Then I, of course, always post about it.
Good.
Usually with, it could be a diagram which is pointing towards it, because most people are quite visual. So it needs to be something that communicates quite effectively.
Yep.
I do regular blogs as well, which updates exactly where we've started, where we're coming from, and where we're potentially going to. So in terms of that level of communication, that's how I'm staying on top of the information and how I'm disseminating the information, not only to our rescheduling clients, but potential clients, and also for the industry itself, because the reality is that even some of us in the industry get confused by the messaging.
Absolutely.
And also not forgetting that posts on Instagram or Facebook or so forth, if someone's posting from Queensland, they don't always articulate that it's just about Queensland. And the same with Victoria, although poor old Victoria hasn't been allowed to have weddings for quite some time, but they are now. Limited though they may be, at least it's a good start.
Yeah, at least
So
we're
that we,
moving in the right direction.
exactly. It's starting to move forward, which is going in the right direction.
Yeah.
So that's how we're trying to, not only keep on top of the information ourselves, but disseminate the right information. And I think that's really important, because the more of us in the industry and allied industry, so all of our partners that are actually basically saying exactly the same thing, the more credibility the whole of the industry obviously has.
Definitely. And it's a really good point, because people that are looking for a wedding planner or an event planner, they should make sure that they choose somebody that is responsible and is keeping up to date with what they can and can't do. Because if they promise them the world, and it's actually not legal, and who knows what other implications it has, it's a disaster.
I think that's correct. And I think that, character isn't revealed in the good times, is it?
No.
And I think that the industry has the individual personalities and characters of each individual operator, but I think the industry per se has a character that actually probably still is in its development stage. But let's be moving towards the real mature factor that we need to really have this as a active, viable, stable, reliable, and credible. And without trust within this industry, I don't think that our futures are that bright.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's where I come from. So the compliance is definitely, that's a given. We have to do it. But where I come from as well is that, as I said before, if someone was to become unwell at an event or wedding that I have planned and delivered, and I knew I hadn't gone to every possible level and measure to ensure that as much possible, COVID safety measures were in place, I would be very uncomfortable with myself.
Sure, absolutely. And so does that mean everybody that's working has to be wearing gloves and masks at all times, even in the kitchen?
You will find them, they are, yes.
Yeah,
Obviously it's an individual issue for how they interpret their own practices, but you will find most that are. We've had to learn to operate effectively wearing masks. The funniest thing is, once you've had a mask on for several hours, it gets very warm in there.
Yeah.
Also, these disposable gloves. Size is an issue. If they're too big, they fall off. If they're too small, they break. Trying to do little styling things like
little delicate things that you have to do.
Yeah, exactly. So little bows on guest favors and all those sorts of things in gloves is really tricky, I can tell you. So the last wedding we did, I literally sat there for hours and hours and hours pre the wedding day, because I knew that I was not going to have time on the wedding day, because that particular wedding day we started set up at 7:30 in the morning, and our delivery was for a 3:30 ceremony with a 5 o'clock reception.
Wow.
So that's the other side of the thing, that the wedding guests and even the bride and groom, they don't see that, even though we talk about it, and obviously we factor it into the activation and the master timeline and run sheet, as well as the cost schedules. However, unless you're physically present there and being part of it, it's pretty hard to imagine what that looks like.
Sure.
So the pretty that we see at the end of the day is about that much of the whole, what I call back of house, that goes to it, to any big day. I mean,
It's like an iceberg. It's that great analogy of the iceberg. You
that's
only
it.
see the tip
Yes,
of the iceberg, but you don't see what's underneath.
yes, and all of that
Yeah.
is very deep.
Hmm.
It's got some nice edges to it, but it also can be quite dangerous as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's understanding how that day looks and comes together and is delivered, but knowing that all these things underneath, like the really dangerous part of the iceberg, have to work
yeah.
pre-wedding day to make sure that there is no COVID wedding planning stress or delivery stress on the day. And that
Wow.
is the ultimate goal, is that we do not want the bride, the groom, any couples to feel that it's been somehow a stressful journey,
Yeah,
regardless of whether, we're operating in a reset mode or in a current COVID
yeah, yeah,
19 restriction mode.
yeah.
Always,
And
sorry.
what's been the feedback? I mean, what have people that you've put on these weddings for very, very recently?
Yeah.
What have they been saying? That was fantastic, so fresh, so different. What have they been saying?
Uh, we actually, a very delightful couple have gone out of their way to be so complimentary. They even at their wedding reception, they raised a toast and they thanked not only myself but obviously all the suppliers and
Oh,
vendors
great.
who were party to the day. They did actually send me a little vignette video,
Oh,
which I
nice.
have put on the front page of my homepage of our website, because I'm personally very proud.
Yeah.
It was so touching. I literally started to cry.
Wow.
So it is definitely a beautiful thing
Yeah.
when people take the time to stop, pause, and
Nice.
say thank you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it means the
Huge
world.
thing, a huge event that you did.
And you know what? The joy on their faces
Yeah.
was the thank you that I really needed. But for them to actually go to the trouble that they have also done, they've also taken the time
Yep.
to leave a beautiful review on our Google business page.
Lovely.
And I know that that's not for everyone. And of course, if you don't have a Gmail account, it's quite hard to leave
Yep.
a Google business review anyway. So the bottom line is, you know, we always appreciate any feedback, even a text saying, thanks, we
Yep.
just had a great
Love it.
day.
Oh, how
It's
fantastic.
beautiful, because that at the end of the day, we know that we've delivered what you want exactly your way.
Yep.
And that's our takeaway from the whole experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I can imagine, I'm just putting a figure, it probably takes you 30-40% more effort to put the same style of wedding together now than I did before because of all these extra
Correct.
issues and extra things that have to go on behind the scenes. So it's a
I
lot
think
of work.
it is a lot more work. Basically, what we have had to do is factor in probably 20% more hours in a full replan and restyling. And don't forget, a lot of this is including venue activation. So we're actually having change of venues as well.
Right. Yeah.
So for instance, the last one would have been in Sydney. In the end, it was done in the Hunter Valley, which
Nice.
was
Yeah.
exquisite.
Yeah.
Because their new vision was English country charm.
Oh,
Okay, I think we delivered on that brief 100%, and
great.
so they've said. So now we're having to do things like, well, we had to obviously spend days going on site visits. So there's another full 8 to 10 hour day. And it's
Yeah.
not usually one site only. We would usually go have 2 or 3 that we would
Wow.
consider.
Yeah.
So there's one side of it. The other side of it is that, with limiting the amount of human interaction on the day, which means we don't have as many team members. So it means more work by one individual or 2 individuals.
That's a good point.
And that's adding hours, not only in the planning stage, which is not such a big deal, but on the day where time is really a penalty.
Yeah.
Because we have something we have to be ready for 3 o'clock
Yep.
or a 3:10 clean shoot of a space. You
Yep.
know all about that, Darren.
Yes, I
And if we
do.
don't get the clean shoot, then the couple do not see the space before it's populated by wedding guests,
That's right.
suppliers.
Yep. Great
um,
staff, whatever.
Exactly. Everybody wandering around, and of
Yep.
course things, the lovely programs have been moved and the florals have been moved, and,
Yep.
the petals have been thrown. So that's the only opportunity. So on these sorts of days, that's why we start the bump-ins so early.
Yeah.
And but we have critical paths that we have to be ready for.
Right.
So I always have a little bit of a pad in terms of, right, I need at least 20 minutes before the population starts to grab all those shots, not only by photography but videography, because as you know, we're capturing a different perspective from video than that of photography.
Definitely.
And the two combined are beautiful.
Oh yeah.
You do get different experiences from both media.
100%. I love them both. I think they're
Yeah,
both fantastic.
absolutely. And I think that they go hand in hand
Yep.
and support each other beautifully on the day. So, so on this day, 3 o'clock, we had to be ready for the ceremony, which started at 3:30. And of course, as luck would have it, our guests started arriving early.
As they do.
Clean set was a little bit tricky. And then, of course, a 5 p.m. reception.
Yep.
We had to have a clean set by 4:30.
Wow.
So, and that's while a ceremony is going on. So then you've got the places populated externally, but we need to capture all this internally for sure.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's still while it's going on, and then of course we have usually a transition post the ceremony, which would be a canapé and champagne service, which of course is when more photography is going on with the bride, the groom, the wedding parties, families, friends, guests, etc. And whatever other, activities are going on. Then we transition into the reception, which in this case had become more of a formal dinner than an actual wedding party, if you like. And so therefore what we did, we could factor in a lot more speeches. So where you'd normally only have 3 or 4 speeches at a traditional wedding, max, I would say, we had 8 speakers.
Yeah, it becomes like that onus becomes more on the entertainment now.
Well, it becomes really quite informative as well, because there's a lot of backstories that can be told, which we wouldn't necessarily get to hear under a reset or a pre-COVID wedding day. That's because mostly it is usually best man, of course, father of the bride, possibly the father of the groom, maybe the bride. Our bride did actually speak, and she was fabulous too. So we do get to hear a lot more of the engagement across what are the relationships here and how long we've known each other, and a few backstories that are relevant, and it really personalizes the day, and I think it creates more of an intimacy amongst all of the wedding guests, who are quite transfixed by all of the speakers.
Yeah, I certainly would be. That'd be fun. It's more like becomes more like a production, a floor show, a spectacle that you're going to see, rather than going through the motions, getting up and you want to just start dancing and having a drink.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, that's quite usual. And of course, everybody loves to get up and have a bop. There's no question about that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but not at the moment.
Yeah.
So that's why when we did pivot that wedding day, and we did actually position the first dance as a component of the ceremony, but also as an exit strategy from the ceremony. It was quite a surprise. And I'm also delighted to say it is the first time that was ever done.
Wow, how cool is that? Wow.
So we're very excited about it. And I've got to send out a big thank you to Amy at Dream Wedding Studio, Dream Dance Wedding Studio, who actually did work with our couple, because they only had 2 weeks.
Wow.
And the end result was absolutely spectacular. It was so endearing. There wasn't anyone there that was totally engaged in what was going on. The other exciting thing about that particular pivot to the wedding day was that the piece of music that they chose as their first dance piece was quite a unique piece from a Japanese composer, which was originally set for, or the composition was for piano. Yeah. We had a strings trio. So that particular piece had to be re-scored specifically for 2 violins and a cello, which we had done by the Sydney Chamber Orchestra maestro.
My God.
Yeah. And that was all within 2 weeks as well.
Oh, God, so, a lot of stuff going on there in that time. Oh, my Lord.
Was a lot, yeah. And certainly I don't think one of the highlights for me was the horse and carriage. Fortune,
Yeah.
the horse, was absolutely darling, and she was so beautiful, and quite clearly was very used to being the star of the show.
Yep. Yep. Well
Except
done.
I've got to say, I think our bride did steal her thunder just a little bit.
Good, as you'd expect.
Well, of course. And she was delightful. Her gown, which I've got to say, was so angelic and was designed and delivered within 3 weeks by the talented couturier Rhonda Hemingway Couture in Paddington.
Wow. Wow.
Now, the hand beading alone with all the Swarovski crystals normally would take months. So I've got to say that was an
Incredible.
exceptional effort. So that's what I'm saying. All of these things, the elements that you would think, because normally when we look at a wedding gown, we're looking minimally 6 months, and we're not even talking couture. This is a design gown specifically for this particular bride, and the reason we had to do was that there had been an issue with her previous gown, so we needed to, shall we say, come up with a solution to the challenge overnight. So of course, who would I call on a Sunday afternoon at 5:30 with only 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks to go to the wedding, but dear Rhonda Hemingway.
Wow, well done.
Didn't blink an eye. She said, "Of course, darling, we'll do it." So
well
that's
done.
what I'm saying. Even signage. We had to have specific signage created, which now becomes part of a community awareness or an announcement service. So they become passive concierge communications tools, so that we don't have to have someone continuously saying, "Please do this, please do that." So we've designed generic wedding day signs that we have activated in ceremony spaces, the reception spaces, all of the conduit spaces, which are public access, plus bathrooms as well. So that the constant reinforcement of the message without it being totally in your face. And they're all to wedding day style. So they're not just, nasty little signs. They're actually quite beautifully styled around the theme of the day. And they become part of the wedding livery of the day, if you like. And of course, they are decored by the florist as well.
Well done. Well, I mean, that sounds like things are moving, in the right direction. At least things can be done now, as opposed to when we started, when you couldn't do anything.
But I think that we've also got to remember, Darren, that we've still got a bit of a ways to go before we're completely back to where we were before.
Of course.
We're talking quite considerably some time, because for that to actually be a full reset, then we're talking international borders being fully operational, coming back to capacity again. When we do start to see things starting to move, and let's remember, most of the heads of aviation have informed if it's going to be late next year to early the following year before operations start to ramp up.
Wow.
Within that, in terms of even transport, which is the carriage of passengers, you've had all these operational staff on the ground, pilots, flight attendants, who all have to be requalified. So there are thousands and thousands and thousands, and that's just purely in Australia, and then you've got the overseas ones and so forth. So capacity will be a rolling development and rollout of capacity, because it's impossible to say, "Oh, look, we're just going to do all this overnight." So, and also, let's not forget the cost involved in all of this as well. So, I think when we talk about resetting, we've got to look at the layers upon layers that actually will be going into that, and understand that, with capacity rolling back, it's still, even after we're reset, it's going to be some time before we're completely operational at pre-COVID stage.
Absolutely. Wow.
But we'll get there.
We'll get there. Onwards and upwards, at least we're moving in the right direction, and things can be done. And with a bit of creativity and a bit of innovation, you can create a beautiful tone and style of a wedding that might be a little different, but might also be as, or if not more, charming.
I think that that's the real opportunity here, is to take something that could become a little mainstream and a little, we've all done that, and really turn it into something special, which is what I'm pleased to say that we've been informed we were able to achieve. And we hope to be able to achieve quite a few more before the end of the year is over. Of course, that's entirely at the hands of our clients and potential clients. But I'm hoping with the new service, which is the wedding day and pre-wedding day concierge service, that will fill that gap that is there, because quite often there's an assumption that something will be done by the venue coordinator, which actually isn't within their purview. It's not, because it's not to do with the venue per se.
Yes.
So we're happy to talk about specific packaging relating to the services that are only the gap requirements.
Gotcha. Yeah. So if people want to get in touch with you to chat about any of these services, what's the best way for them to do it?
Certainly they can go to the website and our contact us page, or if you're so inclined, and what I personally love, just give me a call on +61 4 16 20 80 92 and just say hello and tell me about your day and what it is in your mind and your partner's mind, and whether or not we partner together. I'm sure that they'll go away with a little bit more information that's only going to add to the planning journey. So we really can't wait to hear from you.
Fantastic. Well, for everybody out there, Kerrie is so passionate about what she does. She's so well connected. She's knowledgeable. She's got a finger on the pulse with what you can and can't do in this period. So if you have anything planned, give her a buzz, have a chat, and you never know what you can come up with, and I'm sure it'll be amazing. So Kerrie,
sorry, Darren.
Yeah. No, go for it.
We'd love to hear from anybody out there who'd like to give us a call, because we love genuinely what we do.
Beautiful, and it shows.
Thank you.
I always like to ask my guests at the end of the show, anything you want to leave us with? Any thoughts? Any parting thoughts?
Stay positive and don't stop dreaming about the big day. I mean, one of the takeaways from this is that, at the start of this, the couple were a little bit nervous. At the end of it, they had no nerves left whatsoever. And the point is that to keep believing in what is achievable. And of course, I think if you have a look at the video that they've put up, the lovely bride says something really poignant, and that is, yes, you were right about everything. I shouldn't have stressed too much. And
that's great.
And it got a big laugh from the whole of the audience. I was privileged to be there because I was also emceeing the wedding as well.
Oh, so multitasking.
It's been a while since I've emceed a wedding. I normally do leave it to the MC professionals, because after a long day of setup, styling and delivery, tacking on another service is really quite tiring. And I can tell you, the feet told me. For about 48 hours after.
Yeah, absolutely. Well done.
So,
Kerrie, thank you so much for coming on the show again. Always a pleasure to have you on and hear what's happening, in that realm and in your area of expertise. So I hope everybody's learned as much as I have. And anybody who's interested, obviously get in touch with Kerrie. She's fantastic. So everybody have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you very, very soon for another episode of Playing with Perspective, the Suspended Animation Podcast, next week. Bye for now.